Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar titled 2cm Porcelain Pavers for Outdoor Living. I'm Jim Olson with the National Tile Contractors Association. I want to welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend today's webinar sponsored by Daltile. Before I introduce today's speaker, I have some business to take care of. I want to remind you that during the webinar, you'll be muted. Please use the questions area on your computer to type in your questions, and we'll answer those questions at the end of this presentation. If the audio on your computer is poor, either turn up your volume or call the number on the invite to this webinar and listen on your phone. All NTCA webinars are available to watch at any time on the NTCA YouTube channel shortly after the webinars are presented. This gives you easy access to watch and or share all current and past programs at your convenience. All right, here we go. Happy to introduce today's speaker, Bill Graves. He leads the Daltile's exterior program for outdoor living products for North America. He's a 21-year veteran of the hardscape industry, the past 4+ years with Daltile. He's traveled North America for the last 15 years and has consulted on hardscape installations in every climate and all soil conditions. In addition to a career devoted to selling multiple materials into the outdoor living world, Bill was a captain in the U.S. Army and is a 1994 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. Congratulations, Bill, and welcome. This will be a great presentation. I'm excited to listen and hear what you have to say. Thank you.
All right, Jim, thank you very much. And thanks to everybody else, as Jim said, for carving out a little bit of time out of your certainly otherwise busy schedules. So I really appreciate everybody making the time to come together here today and learn a little bit about the opportunity that's offered by outdoor installations of ceramic and porcelain products, and in this case primarily focusing on 2 centimeter thick or 3/4 inch thick porcelain pavers for outdoor living spaces. And of course, there's a lot of different products that are suitable for installations for outdoors, but the tile industry has really, over the last 8 years now in the US has really accelerated attention on outdoor installations. Basically due to the advent of these thicker, stronger pavers with good slip and skid resistance. So why is that? Outdoor market trends. Let's look at those and what's happening in those markets today. Jim mentioned that I'm a 21-year veteran of the hardscapes industry, and the hardscapes industry really encompasses, your porcelain pavers, your concrete pavers, your natural stones, your clay bricks for the most part. Those are the people that sort of participate in that industry and in that industry's events, right, and their trade shows and things like that. So that whole just sort of on grade, right, not even really talking about pedestal jobs or balconies or decks even, but on grade, right, on the ground, outside, decorative paving is about $3.5 billion wholesale, so to the contractor on an annual basis. So certainly an attractive market for the tile industry to look outside the four walls of the building, right, and see maybe larger spaces, new materials. And one of the things that really drove that attention on the outdoor living space was COVID. Honestly. So as the bullet says, the pandemic isn't new news anymore, but it spiked interest in outdoor living spaces, both residentially and commercially across the world, globally. But if you think about it, people weren't getting on the airplane, right? They weren't going to the movies. They weren't going to concerts or sporting events. They weren't going to the restaurant. They weren't going to the tavern, right? They just weren't moving around. Plus, everybody's stuck at home and everybody's on a Zoom call or a WebEx or a Teams, or the kids are online learning, and everybody's on top of each other, right? And most homes over the last 25 years have been open floor plan homes. So it's noisy when you got 3 or 4 people on 3 or 4 different online meeting platforms. So people started looking out the back door, right? Let's finally put that pool in. Let's do an outdoor office space so I can go out in the quiet, have my coffee, and get on my multiple Zoom meetings throughout the day. And then, commercially, people started looking at safer spaces for outside. A lot of, boutique restaurants, cafes on the sidewalk more than previously. A lot more rooftop pedestal applications going for outdoor space where people can commune with nature and each other safely. So even though not too many people are worried about the safety aspect at this point anymore, it really had a profound impact on the outdoor living market. And then you've also got newer materials coming to play, like the 2cm porcelain pavers that offer different performance characteristics that we'll talk about here in a moment. But if you look at this page or the photo on the right, I mean, this is like a 30,000 square foot rooftop commercial project with pedestals and porcelain. But these pedestal jobs on the rooftops, not only are they attractive, functional spaces, but in urban environments actually has environmental impacts too. If you use a light colored paver, it can contribute to the reduction of urban heat dome, for instance, while still having a functional space. So there's a lot of things residentially, commercially, that are, multifamily especially, that are sort of driving more attention being focused on outdoor living spaces than any time in the past. So how do we all go about taking advantage of that opportunity that's presented? So what kind of different spaces can we do with porcelain pavers, right? A bunch. Rooftops, balconies, patios, common areas, outdoor kitchens, work from home, driveways, porticoches commercially, yes, drivable with the right application, amenity centers, pool decks, even vertical surfaces, and even countertops. And in fact, this picture on the left-hand side of this screen was a job recently completed outside of Philadelphia on the Jersey side. But you can see, so here's a Pennsylvania bluestone look 2cm paver, and then also a Belgian bluestone look 2cm paver. But there's the field tiles, modular pattern. Then they shattered the tiles actually to do an inlay, and shattered them to clad or veneer the outside of the custom-made fire pit. The top ring of the fire pit is porcelain, and then over here you can see a grill station on the far left side. That whole countertop is 2cm porcelain pavers also. So there's a lot of different applications and uses for this very, very versatile product. And just want to call your attention real quick to this bullet at the bottom underneath the picture here, the caption. Not only did nearly 80% of Americans invest in outside upgrades during COVID, but 90% agree that outdoor living space is more valuable than ever before. And we're seeing this across the entire country. More and more custom home builders are including outdoor living spaces, complete backyard living spaces. And in fact, some of the higher profile tract home builders like your Toll Brothers and some others are also including outdoor living spaces as part of their build out now. That was unheard of from tract home builder 10 years ago. So it's really becoming more and more of a focus. All right, so let's lean into a little bit why 2cm porcelain. So this is my favorite slide to ever talk to, even though there's no pictures on it, unfortunately. However, the information that it contains is very valuable. And if you look across the top of the screen there, you'll see porcelain pavers on the left-hand side, and then more traditional outdoor decorative paving materials or outdoor flooring materials. And how they stack up. If you look down the left side of the chart, you'll see a series of performance characteristics that all these materials have to have to some degree in order to even be suitable for use in an outdoor environment. But as you'll see in the chart, some of them have higher performance than others on different characteristics. So porcelain pavers on the left-hand side, then you've got clay brick pavers, another fired earth material. Cast in place concrete, which is basically poured, or in this case, if it's going to be decorative, it should be stamped and stained concrete. Then you've got interlocking concrete pavers that make up really the vast majority of that outdoor decorative paving materials market, or the hardscape market. And then of course, natural stone. And natural stone I don't talk about much on this chart for the simple fact that most natural stone, there's such a broad spectrum of natural stone that if I'm talking about, say, a Pennsylvania bluestone or an Oklahoma limestone or a Texas looters, you might be hearing New Hampshire granite, and they're not the same at all, right? They're different, completely different performance characteristics. So I don't talk about it much because it's so varied depending on which stone we're talking about. So I tend to kind of focus on concrete pavers on this particular slide because it's the dominant player in that market. So if we compare concrete pavers to porcelain pavers, and you look at all the performance characteristics down the left-hand side, from stain resistance, sun resistance, scratch resistance, freeze thaw resistance, de-icing salt, which is really just a man-made freeze thaw or a man-made thaw, and then it actually, you know, turns back to water, and then it carries soluble salt down inside the paving material where the water eventually evaporates. The salt's left behind in a solid state where it crystallizes and grows and starts, you know, popping off the top of the surface if it's a porous surface. Which brings me to water absorption. Porcelain, in order to be certified porcelain, it's not even considered porcelain, as you guys I'm sure all know, unless it absorbs less than 0.5%, and that's submerged for 24 hours in a saltwater solution. You weigh it beforehand, you pull it out and weigh it again. If it weighs more than 0.5% more, it's not porcelain. Compare that to concrete pavers, and it's 5%. Right, so that's 10 times, by industry standard, 10 times more water is allowed into a concrete paver than into porcelain as a material. As a result, it's not so good at de-icing salt resistance or freeze thaw resistance or stain resistance, because if water gets into a concrete paver at that rate, well, so does motor oil, right? So does red wine, so does, I don't know, pancake syrup, you know, whatever it is you might be spilling on your patio out there. So from a performance characteristic standpoint, porcelain is by far the most revolutionary product to hit decorative outdoor paving materials, you know, certainly in the 21 years that I've been in the industry, but really since probably the invention of concrete pavers, because everything else on here is older than that. So that would be in the US or North America, at least mid 70s, right? So basically 50 years. In 50 years, porcelain pavers by far the most revolutionary product to hit. It's because it won't scratch, stain, or fade. It's going to look brand new for decades. It's got excellent braking strength. It's got excellent resistance to fading. It's got excellent slip and skid resistance. It's just an unbelievable product. And then look here, if you continue down the chart, you don't seal it. It won't accept a sealer. Everything else except for clay, another fired earth material, is basically recommended to seal, even natural stone, because believe it or not, most of that natural stone that's used for decorative paving has been underground for the last X number of million years. So it hasn't been exposed to the elements. So when you excavate it from the ground, you hone it, you bush hammer it, you thermal flame it, whatever you do to it, and then you put it outside on the ground, you've exposed it to an environment that's never been exposed to before. So yeah, it's millions of years old, but it's in a whole new living environment. So it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be, you know, the ideal solution. And then compressive strength, we look at that. You know, the tile industry has never really looked at compressive strength, but the concrete paver industry has been very boastful for years about their 8,000 PSI because they used it as a point of differentiation from poured concrete, right? That was the competition. So honestly, it's basically an irrelevant measure, because if the paver is supported by the ground or by a concrete slab or whatever, the compressive strength is basically irrelevant. But because the concrete paver are the bulk of the industry and they think that it's important, we went and had it measured, and this greater than 30,000 PSI is very, very conservative. Right? We had some that test out at 64,000 PSI. So ultimately irrelevant. However, when you're going against somebody who says it's important, well, then the porcelain pavers certainly dominate by a landslide. And then all of this great performance is in a very, very freight and labor friendly 9 pounds per square foot, give or take, but basically 9 pounds per square foot. Compare that to 6 or 8 centimeter thick concrete pavers, you're at 27 to 36 pounds a square foot. So that means you can get 3 to 4 times the amount of material on a truck, making it very freight friendly. So go farther. And then once it's on the job site and it's in y'all's hands, you're moving 3 to 4 times less than if you were installing concrete pavers, for instance, on a pedestal roof deck. All right, we're going to jump off that slide now. We're going to find some pretty pictures here in a second. One more thing, though, in terms of cost. So we look at performance, and we understand, and hopefully all agree, that the performance of the porcelain far outstrips basically any materials other than the most dense natural stone that it's basically on par with. Okay, well, what's the cost? You say it's much better, but if it costs 3 times as much, it's not really that much better, is it? Well, as it turns out, it's roughly 10% higher for an install cost all in, right? So this is labor, equipment, material, any subs. About 10% higher than your concrete pavers. And actually during COVID, because that was in 2019, during COVID, concrete pavers got way more expensive. So they're basically at price parity right now with your nicer concrete pavers. And then about 10% lower than your higher end natural stones. But again, the spectrum of natural stone materials available is so broad that, okay, we could be 10% lower than natural stone, we could be slightly higher than some of the less expensive ones, and we can be, 1/10 of, maybe some imported granite from somewhere. So all over the board, but basically it's the top performing material at a mid price point, or almost a lower half price point. So really a compelling story. Here we go. Here's a good picture. So let's start talking about aesthetics, because this is really what catches everybody's attention when you're looking at decorative paving materials or outdoor flooring materials. So with porcelain, just like indoor porcelain, basically any look is possible, with stone, wood, and concrete visuals being the most popular and the most common. And what's really cool now, though, is more and more we're seeing coordinating interior tile in a 3/8 inch thick format, or a thinner format in general, and then your 2cm porcelain tile that has the exact same visual. So you can carry that look from indoors to out, or as we're seeing, it really tends to be more of an outdoors to in, because so many people are thinking about their outdoor spaces, and then they learn that they can carry that same look indoors. And the reason they like that is because when you're indoors looking out this beautiful big back door, your whole space looks bigger because the floor keeps on going right out the back door. So from a design perspective, this is extremely popular, and something that if you want to take advantage of this type of opportunity out in the market, now you can do the outside job and the inside job on one mobilization and end up with more profitable work. But it's definitely something that's exciting a lot of people from an aesthetic standpoint. And then also, we're talking about 2cm porcelain pavers today. However, there's also a lot of vertical porcelain veneers that are made out of your floor tile that match or complement the 2cm porcelain pavers too. So you can have inside out design harmony, and you can have horizontal vertical design harmony now as well. So pretty neat. And then, tile's been around for 1,000 years or more, 2,000 years, 4,000 years, lots of years. So why is outside for tile such a big deal now? And it really is because when the 2cm porcelain came out, it's only twice as thick. However, it's much more than twice as strong. So it's exponentially strong. And historically, if you wanted to do tile outside, you were going to have to bond it, right, to a concrete slab. And you don't have to do that necessarily anymore. So that's a big strength on why it became more appealing. And then the slip and skid resistance. Historically, interior tile is too slippery to use outside, and nobody likes to fall down. So the increased slip and skid resistance and the exponentially stronger braking strength have really made these products exciting, sellable, easily installable, and just really sort of taking off in terms of outdoor decorative flooring material. I'll show you about trim profiles here in a minute, because it's very important for finishing off the space. And then just as a call out, there's a lot of these products stocked in the US right now from multiple distributors, multiple manufacturers, but there's even many more overseas. So like for instance, Daltile, we're stocking like 22, about to be 24 different SKUs, but we've got access to like 112 more from our sister company Marazzi in Europe. So there's just almost no limit to the aesthetics that can be achieved and can be purchased and installed right now, not just achieved with work. So talk about trim a little bit. This is very important. As long as your trim profiles, your trim pieces, whatever they happen to be, are inside the size of the field tile, you can make pretty much anything as long as it's straight, right? As long as it's straight lines and it's inside the size of the tile. But the two most popular ones right now are a step nose, which is just, you know, a mitered and adhered piece of the top on the front of the step, and that can be done on a side or all three sides that are facing out. Really easy to do. And then the pool coping is the other big piece. And you know, there's several different configurations of this, but typically it's going to be 12 inches wide with probably a 6 cm front drop on the front, just because that thickness is what's sort of the standard for clay and for concrete pavers. It's just what people are used to looking at on the front of the pool. But again, we can manufacture or fabricate or, you know, farm out fabrication for just about any size or shape of these things, as long as it's inside the size of the tile. So I had some custom made steps made where it was a 7 foot or 7 inch drop all the way around in a 16 by 48 inch tread. And if you compare that to the same size, say natural stone, it's basically 90 pounds versus 100 pounds. So one guy, 2 grabos, place it easily versus a guy with a vacuum attachment or a huge clamp on a skid steer, right? So there's a lot of advantages to working with this lighter material. So knowing that I'm speaking with the NTCA, I can tell you guys that when I first came to Daltile 4.5 years ago, I didn't realize, you know, what I knew versus what people knew in the tile world, and how we might be talking past each other on a bunch of different things because we just have different assumptions. And it took 18 to 24 months to really get past most of them, you know, discover them and then get past them. But one of the things that I learned early on was I had a lot of, you know, say my architectural sales staff, for instance, you know, asking, can we put interior tile on pedestals? Can we drive on the interior tile, or can we sand set interior tile? So basically, you know, we came up with a document when to go thick, right? When to use 2 cm instead of something else. And basically it's anything that's unbonded, right? So raised flooring, always. Vehicular traffic, always, although you could get away with bonded on a concrete slab with a thin tile, but it doesn't cost that much more. And with the increased braking strength, I would say vehicular traffic, always. If you're going over a flexible base, which I'll tell you about very shortly, always. And then basically, if it's an outdoor installation, for the most part, just lead. Be thinking 2 cm for the slip and skid resistance and the braking strength. But there are other products that you can use if bonded. And so that's what this slide says, when to go thin. Bonded applications only. And then also, if you're going outside, you still need that high dynamic coefficient friction for, you know, appropriate slip and skid resistance outdoors. Now, there are standards for that. Certainly for commercial applications, for residential applications, there are no standards. But if you've ever stood on a slippery pool deck and had trouble walking on it, you know that it's not an enjoyable experience. So if you're going outside, still lead with 2 cm, but make sure that you insist on a high dynamic coefficient of friction as well. All right, this is the exciting part about 2 cm, right? So we've got above grade on pedestals, and this first picture honestly is a hotel pool deck that's over a parking garage. You'd never know it to look at it, but it's an elevated pavement and it's beautiful. And then there's above grade on deck framing, so wood or steel deck framing, and in this case it can be unbonded. Right, so this has been a known application for a long time for balconies and other roof deck applications. But for just a wood frame deck, you can come over and do an unbonded installation of 2 cm porcelain pavers, and for a beautiful result. On grade over flexible base, and this is more of a hardscape style installation, like clay brick, interlocking concrete pavers, some natural stones, cobbles, things like that. So it's not a bonded application. And then on grade bonded, and this is the one that everybody on the call, I'm certain, is most familiar with. So that would be setting material and grout, whoever the manufacturer happens to be. But I'm going to show you a newer product, at least to the US, for doing 2 cm porcelain pavers outdoors in a bonded application. So let's look at each one of those. Just an overview. There's a lot that could be talked about from a technical standpoint on every one of these installation options, but I think it's beyond the scope of this block of instruction, and certainly beyond the scope of time that we've got available. So let's just do an overview on each of these installation styles. So this is becoming really, really popular, and it's nothing new, all right? It's been around for 30, 40 years, primarily with concrete pavers, which your primary manufacturers of those for pedestals would be Wausau and Hanover, and I'm certain some of you have heard of those companies. But in my travels now, people are telling me that it used to be 90% concrete pavers, and now it's on specs, and now it's basically approaching 80% porcelain pavers on specs, and it's because they're easier to get on the roof, they're cost competitive, they're easier for the crews to manage once on the roof because they weigh a quarter or a third of what the concrete weighs. And then, you know, they've got the potential for much lighter colors where the light color lasts. So you can make a white concrete paver, but you put it outside and you put people on it, and it's going to get stained and it's going to get dirty, and there's going to be erosion that happens to the top, and you're going to start seeing the aggregate that's underneath it, and that's going to make it darker and darker. So when we talk about things like solar reflectance index and urban heat dome, if you have a light colored porcelain paver, it stays light, right? So it doesn't erode. There's no aggregate underneath that starts to show through over time, and it doesn't stain. It's easy to clean. So when we look at solar reflectance index, there's actually new SRI and 3-year aged SRI, and that's because concrete gets darker with time. With porcelain, there's no 3-year aged SRI because the 3-year SRI is the same as the brand new SRI. So it's becoming incredibly popular. When we talk about pedestal applications, couple of technical items real quick. Fall through protection, you're going to hear about that, and wind uplift prevention, you're going to hear about that too. Both of those things are topics of conversation, mostly because concrete pavers saw that, you know, porcelain was moving in and taking a big chunk of their market share, and they said, how do we make these you know, insufficient for the application when we're talking to specifiers? And basically, well, they're so light they're going to blow off the roof, and because they're brittle, if they have a hard object impact, they're going to shatter, and somebody's going to get cut, and they're going to go through. And that doesn't really happen with a concrete paver because it's softer, basically, right? It can take that blow without shattering. So when it comes to porcelain, all you have to know is that you will hear about fall through protection, and you're going to hear about wind uplift prevention, but everybody's got a solution for it, right? So there's different solutions out there, different backers that you can use, or underlayment products, or different types of tie down or adhesives, whatever, but everyone's got a solution that they will stand behind. And if they don't, look for somebody else, right? Look for somebody that does. Easy peasy. So in these pedestals, if you haven't done them before, I would encourage you to look into them, and I'm certainly happy to send out some more educational video content that we've already got in the can for anybody that's actually interested. But there's some good dough in it. It's relatively easy install, at least once you get the stuff up on the roof. It continues to be more and more popular, and we're actually seeing a lot of custom home builders now using these as decking, basically, like over garage, flat roof. You know, they'll put a banister around it. You've got a nice upstairs elevated entertaining area. And the cool thing about the pedestals is there's no grout, right? So it's over typically a low sloped floor that slopes to drain, but the pedestals themselves are adjustable in height. So you end up with a perfectly flat outdoor floor. Typically outdoors, you have to slope it to control rainwater. But in this case, the joints are open. So any water that falls on it makes its way to the joints, goes through to the deck, and runs to drain or scupper or downspout or whatever it happens to be. So a really neat application, and something that's becoming more and more popular. The picture here, we see Profilitech as the pedestal. Big fan of this particular pedestal, but there's a number of brands out there: Bison, Buzon, Eterno Ivica, you know, lots and lots more. Schluter's got one. I think Mapei's coming out with one now. So that just goes to show you that it's a lucrative market. There's more people getting into it and producing more and more pedestal brands. And then above grade on deck framing. So here's that perfect example of your above and below design harmony. So your walkout basement matches your elevated deck. Actually, if they would have been really thinking, they could have dropped some stone in on those steps. And then if that was a porcelain paver, can match your interior floor, can match your walkout basement. Really pretty neat what you can do with these things. But what's especially cool is, believe it or not, and again, just the way concrete pavers became expensive during COVID, so did composite decking. It went through the roof. So you can basically have a porcelain paver deck that's never going to scratch, stain, or fade. You're never going to have to sand it. You're never going to have to stain it or seal it. It's never going to give you a sliver. And a screw or a nail fastener isn't going to back out and bite you on the foot or rip off the bottom of your flip-flop. But again, so you can have that for basically the exact same cost, maybe a % or two more than a top-level Trex or AZEK decking that's going to fade and cup in 6 or 7 years. You can have one that's virtually ageless, right, for about the same price. So it's and really cool opportunity here, because I said the $3.5 billion was the hardscape industry, double that for North American deck market on an annual basis. So there's a lot of opportunity. Just have to have more people out there highlighting it and showing it and talking about it. So in this case, underlayment products available where it can still be over just the joist framing, loose laid, water permeable or not. Options do exist, but it's another space. And before I forget, there's also very, very low pedestals that are basically spacers that we would just consider to be like a permanent spacer or a leave-in spacer or a bottom spacer. If you've got a serviceable wood or composite deck that's reasonably flat, you can overlay it in a couple of hours, right? So that's a service that you can offer somebody with these very low pedestals that are no moving parts or anything, just plop, 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 spacer, 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 overlay the entire deck as long as you've got room at the threshold, and then you get to the outside edge, you just slap a little bit taller fascia board on it, and that becomes your edge restraint and it holds everything in and together. So a really fast way to turn some dough as well. All right, on-grade flexible base. This is my hardscape industry style of installation. So very similar to concrete pavers, clay brick pavers, and some natural stones, but this is an unbonded application. So it's loose laid. Now, a lot of people call it sand set or gravel set. No, it's just flexible base is what we really ought to call it. And then when it comes to porcelain, I am not an advocate for sand setting. Or using a sand setting bed in markets that experience any freeze thaw. So go ahead and use it in Florida, use it in Southern California, parts of Texas, especially if you've got good soil like Phoenix in Florida, Vegas. Good soils help too. But if you've got freeze thaw cycles and you've got expansive clay soils where there's going to be movement, when it swells, when it gets saturated with water and then contracts when it dries out again, then I would highly, highly recommend that your setting bed, that top inch, is a chip stone like you see in the picture here. So like a number 8 stone or a number 9 stone or a blend of those two that's called an 89 stone. But it's a much, much more structural setting bed. So I highly recommend that. And here in the picture, you can see some of these leave-in spacers or permanent spacers. So those stay in there, because in a flexible situation, your pavers can't touch each other. If they do, they will chip. So you don't, that's one difference between laying versus like a concrete paver, for instance, where you click and drop them together, where they actually do touch. These things don't really interlock, but if they did, they would be interlocking via positive mechanical contact from one unit to its neighbor via the spacer bar in the bottom spacer or the permanent spacer. Now, if you use chipstone for your bedding layer, you can use larger clean aggregate for your base layer, which should be more like 6 to 8 inches. And if you leave the joints wide open, which you can do, now you've got a permeable pavement on grade where the rainwater can go through the joints, percolate through the bed, percolate through the base, and eventually percolate back into the ground. Or find a low point and put a pipe in there and send it to daylight somewhere. But it can be permeable, or it can be a runoff pavement. If it's a runoff, you just got to make sure you're managing for your stormwater. Where is it going to go? Do you have to have surface drains? Do you have to have center drains? Do you have to sheet the water off the pavement? Like and similar to that. What I want to tell everybody, though, if you haven't done it before and you're going outside and you need to have a sloped pavement to mitigate stormwater runoff, just keep in mind that it's best case to have your whole plane going in one direction or only one grade change, whether it's like this or to a drain like this. The reason for that is if you introduce a third grade change, well, anybody that's ever done tile around a drain and you have to break the tile and it doesn't look very good. Well, if you have to introduce an envelope cut through your entire field to handle a second grade change, the homeowner better know about that beforehand, right? Because I've seen it where they get pretty grumpy about it after the fact. And it was a learning lesson for actually the guy in this picture in terms of how to manage expectations on the front end. But then, so permanent spacers are required. If you don't leave the joints open because you want a runoff surface, then you're going to have some sort of flexible joint material, right? So not cementitious grout, because it won't tolerate movement and it'll break and come out. And then you also have to have an edge restraint, so just anything along the side to contain that perimeter so it doesn't start to creep away from each other because it's not a bonded application. And there are products, many brands for all those different components of that system. So here we are, a traditional on-grade bonded system. So that would be bonded to a concrete slab or bonded to a thick mortar bed. And the TCNA's got all the different installation standards, your F101 through F104 and probably more. Sorry if I tried to show off and said it wrong. But there are standards for how to do this, and you've got to worry about your control joints, and you got to worry about putting soft joints in for the control joints. And as I said, this is overview. I'm not getting technical, but I do have excellent video content that we did with former NTCA 5-star contractor who works for MAPE now. 20 minutes of telling you everything you need to know about what type of trowel to use, what type of material to use, cleaning, how to lay out your work, et cetera, et cetera. But what I want to tell you guys is there's some beautiful products out there for outdoor environments, even in freeze-thaw climates. And this particular job here, this is at the aquarium at the Omaha Zoo in Omaha, Nebraska. And that sees 2 million visitors per year, which makes it basically tied with San Diego Zoo for the most visitors on an annual basis. And when we sold them this job, we sold it to them because their biggest problem was staining of their decorative materials. And their biggest staining problem was sunscreen. It makes perfect sense. And so we sent up some samples for them to test, and they were absolutely blown away. They put everything they had. I mean, they looked around all their food vendors and said, okay, we got to put the steak sauce on there. We got to put the ketchup and mustard on there, all of it. And they tried to stain it, and they tried to stain natural slate and concrete pavers, and even some asphalt pavers, I think. And of course, they all stained up readily, and ours didn't stain at all. So this job's almost 4 years old in a pretty extreme freeze-thaw climate. And there's not one thing that has popped. And they got a 25-year warranty from the setting and grout material manufacturer on this job. And it looks brand new. I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful job. And one thing I want to point out as well, if this were an indoor job with thin tile versus an outdoor job with thicker tile with the exact same square footage, because the ASP is higher on the outdoor tile, the cost of the materials for setting and grouting is higher. You throw your profit margin on that. Your same size space, outdoors versus indoors, is significantly more lucrative, typically around 50% more for otherwise a very similar amount of work. Now, this is the one that I am currently most excited about. All right, so I came from the hardscape industry. All right, this was going on 4.5 years ago now. And I had already been very familiar with the 2cm porcelain pavers because I saw them come into the hardscape industry really 4 years before I joined the tile industry. So I saw a lot of early installations. I saw a lot of early installation failures. I continue to see a lot of joint sand failures over flexible base installations. So part of our job in the exteriors program at Daltile, part of my job is leading the program, was really to zero in on what are the best installation systems, all right, for outdoor installations. And for the tile guys, you can say just use a bonded application. And you know how to do it. There's maybe some tricks of the trade. It'll be easy for you to learn, but certainly not overwhelming. For the hardscape installers who are used to working on a flexible base and having concrete pavers that touch each other and just some mostly no mixing, right? Concrete paver installers basically don't mix anything. Everything is dry laid. So as a result, they continue to have problems with installing porcelain pavers. And finally, I found Romex. That's a European company based out of Germany, but they've got a Canadian arm that's been in Canada for 7 or 8 years now. But the company itself is over 30 years old, and they have created a series of products that I am absolutely in love with for freeze-thaw tolerance, all climates, all soil conditions. They've been working for 30 plus years in over 30 countries around the world, all different types of environments to install in. But they've got basically a bedding system called Trass, where you screed it out like you would a sand setting bed or a chipstone setting bed, but it's got a binder in it and you've mixed it, right? So you threw it in the gravity mixer, threw it in the wheelbarrow, dumped it out, and as you screed and you lay on it as you screed, as you go. So you're essentially building a slab rather than forming and pouring a slab and waiting for it to cure, and then you come back and have to do all your cleanup and finish work and then start to install your pavers. In this case, once you get your base prepared, you start doing your Trass bedding, you're laying pavers same day. So it's much faster, it's slightly less expensive, maybe about 10% less expensive than a full bonded to a concrete slab system, and it's about twice as fast. So a really, really good solution. And in this case, it's got joint material also that's permeable, and the bedding layer itself, that's the slab that you made, is also permeable. So if you put it over clean stone aggregate base, the whole thing's a drainage field, so water percolates right through. But in this case, the joint material stays in place. It's got a binder in it, but it's got some flexibility. It's a really cool system. And in this picture, this is all bonded. All right, this is all bonded with the Romex jointing material. This is Romex jointing material used on the veneer of the fire pit. So a really, really cool system. And when you've got percolation or permeability, what you also have is very little to no runoff. You have no runoff, you're trapping all the contaminants, heavy metals, hydrocarbons, hydrochlorides, fertilizer granules, all kinds of stuff that would normally sheet off the pavement, hit the gutter, go into the storm sewer, and discharge into our public waterways. In this case, most of that is contained on site, and the water that does actually percolate through the joints and the bedding layer, it gets cleaned of all those contaminants before it gets recharged into the groundwater. So also an extremely environmentally friendly installation. As you see here, horizontal and vertical applications, and as I described, more adjacent to a hardscape install. But in Romex's experience, they're the one company that seems to be selling to both hardscape contractors and tile contractors right now in basically equal measure. It's a really neat system. And if you're wondering, yeah, but is it strong? Can you drive a vehicle on that Romex bonded system? Well, this is something that we did in Dallas. I think we're 3 or 4 weeks ago, but we installed 7 months ago a test pad of our 2cm porcelain pavers over just 3 inches, right? Just 3 inches of this Trass bedding system, bonded it, and it was at the working yard of the largest commercial segmental paving contractor in the state of Texas. And so for 6 months, it got fully loaded dump truck traffic. It got 96,000 pound fully loaded tractor trailer traffic. and it was turning traffic too. The dumps turned on it every day to go to the bulk aggregate bins. So after 6 months, it was still in top shape. So we did what any reasonable company would do, and we figured out let's really put it. Got a tank. All right, how's that for a teaser, right? And yeah, that was me. I got to ride in the tank. It was a lot of fun. So that, guys, really brings us to the conclusion of the presentation. I think on time we're quite good. Lots more content going to come from that tank test day, because guess what? No pavers were harmed in the making of the tank video. So really, really cool testimonial, basically, proof of the system, of how well it works. But more to come on that, and we had fun with it, and hopefully you guys have fun watching it as well. So that's it, Jim. You want to take back over, and maybe we can open up for questions. I would love to have some conversation with another person at this point.
Well, a lot of great information, and definitely a growing field for tile installation and for homeowners in outdoor living. I see a great benefit to this, and I'm really happy that we got the opportunity to have you present this and talk to us, because a lot of our contractors are going down this road and doing pavers and pedestals and outdoor.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great. I do want to tell that Romex, NTCA is in discussions with them to do some presentations and programs, and we're working with Phil as we move forward to present this out in the field. So really excited about it. We do have some questions.
Just so everybody knows, I put my money where my mouth is. I'm presenting today from a hardscape yard in Chicago, Lerby's Landscape Supply.
I love it. Okay, so we got the first one is someone is one of our attendees is saying they're very excited for this presentation. Outdoor installation is where it's at, and what would you consider the most common paver size or format being used nowadays in these outdoor living spaces?
Yeah, by far, 24 by 24 is the most common. However, with the sort of history of outdoor paving materials, there's a pretty big push for more modular products, so like a 24 by 48, 24 by 24, and a 12 by 24, for instance, or 24 by 24, 12 by 24, and 12 by 12. So that is, but in my opinion, that's more of a aesthetic desire based out of habit from the installer base. Sure. So yeah, we are seeing it, but there's a lot of just single size, so 24 by 24s, 20 by 40, 16 by 48, but all pretty large format, especially when it's going into an unbonded application. If it's bonded, wide open, right, as low as 8 by 8s.
Okay, cool, that's great. What do you recommend if someone wants to customize a 2cm porcelain paver in size? Is it difficult to cut, or is it easy to cut, or
obviously that's a relative term. Relative to other hardscape materials, yeah, it's difficult to cut. I mean, it's extremely dense. So best recommendation is some of the 2cm actually does snap cleanly on like the top of the line Ruby Tools, Score and Snap, for instance. I don't know all the brands on that, so sorry to not be brand agnostic, but there are some that snap really cleanly, fast, and easy. And in that case, it's easier than a concrete paver or natural stone. However, if it's one that doesn't snap cleanly and you have to cut it, then best recommendation is really bridge saw with water, with continuous blade, like spend the dough on the blade. But once it's done and it's in good shape, I mean, the stuff lasts forever. So yes, it is more difficult to cut. I'll just answer the question for what it is.
Real quickly, what was the name of the last one you presented, the one that kind of forms a bed itself? Romex? No.
Romex, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm writing this down because it's interesting. The next question kind of goes along with this. So what do you recommend? Sand set installation for vehicle traffic, or would you go with this Romex product?
For vehicular, always bonded. Yeah, always bonded for vehicular.
Always.
So
per vehicle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's other distributors out there that maybe are a little bit less experienced in installation that are advocating for 3cm pavers being fine for unbonded applications for vehicular traffic. But in my experience, they're not. And it's not because they'll break. They won't. The 2cm paver that's quality won't break under a fully loaded F350 diesel, right? It just won't. However, when you're introducing lateral forces or horizontal forces like braking, turning, accelerating, that exhibits this type of force on an unbound installation. And sooner or later, the plastic or rubber spacers that are in there are going to fail, and they're going to start the pavers will start bumping into each other. So it's really more of this motion than a braking strength.
Great explanation. Thank you. That was a good answer. All right. So the Romex installation was interesting. This attendee mentions, and since you mentioned that the installation was permeable, what was in the joints?
It's a jointing compound from Romex. So the three components to the system that we installed are the truss bedding, which it's like Portland, so it's a binder, but it cures out stronger and it doesn't produce any efflorescence. So people love it for that. So you mix that, the truss, which is just a powder in a bag, just like cement, mix it in a gravity mixer with, X amount of chip stone and a small amount of water. And then the back of the tile or the bottom of the tile, they call it an adhesion elutriant. It's basically a thin set. So you back butter the tile, just don't go all the way to the edge, because if you do, when you plant it onto that bedding layer, it might squeeze into the joint. And if it does, it blocks water flow. And then the jointing compound is another Romex product. In this case, it's called EcoFine, but they've got, 6 or 8 different jointing compounds for different levels of traffic that all allow the water to go through. And this is what really blew my mind, is the day we did that tank test, it was rainy, it was muddy. That pavement, we had to find it basically and uncover it and pressure wash it off so that we could see it even. It had been getting beat up so much. And of course, we poured some water on it and it didn't go down the joint because it's been just getting covered up with dirt. I mean, the whole rest of the parking lot's dirt. And so we pressure washed it, right? It was pressure washer safe. And then we poured the water on it again, went right down. So after 6 months of more abuse than any joint would ever take in a real porcelain installation, we restored permeability in 30 seconds of pressure washing. Really cool.
That's great. So if someone wants more information, I'm just going to say in 2024, NTCA is hoping to have a outdoor living 2cm porcelain paver program put together. We travel around the country doing free programs, so look for that. But right
Good.
now, if you're looking for more information, Phil, how would they get in touch with you, or where would you send them to get more information?
Yeah, thank you for the reminder. I did take a note and I was probably going to forget. So I did not put my contact information in the slide deck. So anybody that wants to write this down real quick, my name is Phil Graves, Graves. I'm with Daltile. My email is phil.graves@daltile.com. And I'll give you out my phone number too. If anybody wants to call me, 512-809-9976. Again, 512-809-9976. You can also go to daltile.com/exteriors. Exteriors only has an X on the beginning, no E before it, otherwise spelled the same. Daltile.com/exteriors, and you'll find tons and tons of good content. If you scroll all the way down on that page and click the bottom right bubble, it says exteriors documents. It'll take you to warranty documents, how-to videos, I mean, lots and lots and lots of stuff. And then I've got a YouTube channel. It's unlisted, but anybody that wants to send me an email and ask me to send you some of the blocks of instruction that we've made, they're a little bit long, I'm not going to lie to you, but if you're truly interested in the opportunity, the content is absolutely excellent. And most of it, not me, most of it's coming from people that are out there in the field working with the product on a regular basis. So some really top talent, top credible people in the video content that we've got for education.
Phil, just in case, you know, it's good that you gave out the information, because if they would have gotten a hold of me, I'd have given it to them too. So, all right, we got some more questions here and things. So, how about
Great.
this? On 3cm materials, do you see this work being done by landscapers, or is there an opportunity for tile contractors with the 3cm products?
Yeah, same opportunity, but I'm going to be honest with the entire group here right now, and people are welcome to disagree with me. I don't see any reason for 3cm. I don't see a reason for it. The breaking strength of 2cm is so strong, and it's suitable for vehicular traffic. It's tank proof, right, in the bonded application. The 3cm doesn't add anything except for cost. And if you can't do it in a vehicular application unbonded, it doesn't have an advantage. It doesn't have a point of differentiation. But if there's a more specific question than that about 3cm, I'm happy to entertain it.
Sure, sure. And also there's another benefit of 2cm. It's lighter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Spread farther, it's easier to move around. And if it's strong, if it's more than strong enough, I just don't.
So I'm going to move on. So comparing to other surfaces that you mentioned, what about heat retention? How does it compare?
It basically is it all goes to the color. So the lighter the color, the cooler the product. Now, the only thing that's maybe a little bit different about that is if you've got like a travertine that's got a lot of holes in it, it facilitates airflow a little bit more. But the travertine next to a porcelain paver with the exact same color range, I'd say the travertine will be a little cooler, but not a lot cooler. And we've got lab tested solar reflectance index values for all of our stocking SKUs in the US available for anybody to see on the website. So we'll tell you, like, based on measure. Yeah.
Good. These questions are really kind of percolating in my mind here because they're great questions. So
there's some good ones coming through. I'm impressed.
Yeah, is there a size or a situation where you would need, and we're talking the pedestal part of it now, a middle support or edge support or a mesh laminated back or anything like that?
Did you ask that question, Jim, or did that come from the group?
Oh, I'd love to say I asked that, but that's my training director asking that.
Okay, so in the pedestal world, the max span that you can have of any pedestal is 24 inches. So if your format is longer than 24 inches, you got to throw one in the middle somewhere. Now, a central pedestal, there's some debate about this. So most manufacturers of tile will recommend a central pedestal over a certain height, a certain floor height or a certain pedestal height. At Daltile, we recommend it at 4 inches and above. I've seen it as low as a ½ inch, but I also know plenty of installers that say the central pedestal doesn't do anything. And I tend to lean in their direction on that, although it does something as long as it's touching. But that's the hard part. If you got a large format paver, getting your arm underneath there and making sure that the pedestal is, you know, raised up enough to actually make contact and do its job, it's a little bit tricky. So I'm much more on board with some sort of a backer, whether it's a fiber reinforced mesh peel and stick, whether it's a factory adhered galvanized steel plate, whether it's a plastic tray that bridges over the pedestals, fiber reinforced plastic grating, something that if the tile breaks, it doesn't go anywhere. But if you have a middle pedestal and then only the corners supported beyond that, and the tile breaks, it's still going through. It's still going through. It makes it a little bit less likely to break if the impact is right in the middle, at least.
Okay. Yeah, great. All right, that was really good.
I know that more will come out about that, and we'll probably zero in on industry standards sooner or later. But
I'm sure we'll have another follow-up presentation on it too, Phil. I mean, this is very a growing field for us, so that's great. Yeah, definitely. All right, let's see what we got here. A lot of people are saying thank you, great presentation. They really appreciate it.
I appreciate that.
About miter folding 2cm pavers. Doesn't ask the question, but is there any special miter fold? Do you know what they're talking about? I don't even know. Miter folding.
I don't know miter folding, but mitering, you know, with a bridge saw that goes on an angle is really easy.
Okay.
But
Well,
when it comes to cutting, just to go back to cutting real quick, just go slow and let the blade do the work, right? When you try to push it, you'll chip. But you guys probably are that already. I'm sorry.
Anything, right? That's the same with stone or anything.
Yeah,
Let
the denser the material, the slower you go. That's it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I feel like your training director was sharpshooting me, and I appreciate it, honestly.
No problem. I just have to take some time to reach out to Jake Goldberg and let you know that I'm not, everyone's muted and I'm not unmuting, so sorry about that.
Perfect.
Other than that, a lot of people said thank you, great presentation. Phil, I want to thank you because it was a great presentation, and this is a really, really good topic. And I hope we continue on with these presentations and we can do another one down the line. Okay, Phil?
Yeah, I hope so too. And again, thanks everybody for the time and the compliments. I appreciate that. But the thing I want to leave everybody the most with is this is a massive opportunity to extend your service offering to the outdoor living space. And we only talked about 2cm porcelain pavers. I mean, there's plenty of slip and skid resistant thin tiles that are even lighter and easier to use. You can in bonded applications. Then you start talking about going up the wall vertically. You know, and pool tiles and water features and privacy walls and outdoor kitchens, and just wrapping all that in beautiful, durable, low maintenance ceramic and porcelain products and glass and stone. The opportunity is enormous, right? Enormous.
Well, I think it's great. And oh, here, what do we got here? Oh, we got someone else that says gracias.
De nada.
I don't know Spanish. I can't even say the word. So thank you. That's great. I want to thank everybody for attending today. We had a great audience, and our next program is July 25th. Please look for the invites to that. And Phil, thank you. Have a great summer, and be safe
You guys
there.
too.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Let's go get them.
All right. Thank you all.
All right. Bye-bye.